Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. Thank you again for coming to just take in another wonderful peer and a fascinating perspective. Today here with Perusing's The Power of Values. We're excited to have Ken Folven join us. Ken, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. And before we jump in, an important reminder, make sure to like this episode. Well, of course, it's Ken. You're going to like it a lot. But make sure to click that little like icon, whether you're listening on Spotify or you're over there on Apple Podcasts or you're on even these days on YouTube, catching the rest of the world. But make sure to do that. And you're going to gain some great insights from an industry professional. Share your comments. It's always great because as you share, it allows other people to gain their own insight, their own inspiration, and their own potential future opportunity action. And it's your generosity that makes that happen. So with that, Ken, everybody wants to know, were you born this way or how did you get into the appraisal and valuation profession?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I probably was somewhat born this way. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, you were birthed into perfection is what you're telling us.
Oh, far from perfection, but I do blame my dad a lot for getting me into the industry. So,
oh goodness, tell us about that. So were you, as one person early on had said, they were literally born into the other end of the tape measure, or how was your existence as a young?
Yeah, well, not uncommon in this industry, right? My father was an appraiser himself, and he was an appraiser for a very long time. He's retired now.
Good for him.
But he was an appraiser, and yeah, so he's the one who introduced me to the industry, showed me what an appraisal was, what it was for, all of that fun stuff, and at a really early age, probably. I would say I was probably early college age kid, student, and my dad was doing the appraisal thing, and I started giving him a little help in the office, doing some running around for him. Back in the day, I was helping deliver some of his appraisal reports to his customers, the hard great copies that we used to have.
Yes.
I started off doing that, and on trips up to our cabin in northern Minnesota, we would stop in at properties and either drive comps, or he would hop out and do an inspection or whatnot. And,
love it.
So I was introduced to the appraisal industry at a pretty early age, and that's really where I started.
That's amazing. So was your dad a career appraiser, or was he in something else and then moved over into the valuation and appraisal industry?
I would say definitely the latter part of his career, he was an appraiser. Oh, wow. If I was to guess, it was 15 years or 20 years, maybe something around that. He was a real estate agent, had his license before that, and so was familiar with the appraisal industry a bit. But yeah, that's where he showed me the ropes.
Hey, that's, as they say, life experience. I mean, that's a lot of valuable education you got there, and maybe in exchange for doing chores around the house or something, you didn't realize just how, edumacated, as they like to say, you were going to become from being around all that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I was a poor college student, and I was actually studying in computer networking, and that's the degree I was pursuing in college. And because I was a poor college student and the business was booming with my dad, he convinced me that it might be a good part-time opportunity for me to get licensed and do some work. And so I did that for a few years working under him. I got my license. He trained me in, and I did some appraisal work while I was going to school. And as you know, appraisals can be flexible at times. So it worked well with my studies. And as I was working through that, and then interestingly, computer networking, as I was going to school, I kind of realized how much I didn't want to do that as a profession as I was getting through my degree. But I was so far along that I felt like the best move was for me to finish school. So I finished school, obtained my bachelor's degree.
Oh, wow.
But I continued my kind of passion in the appraisal industry because I really started to enjoy what I was doing. And like I said, the business was booming, so there was a lot of orders to be had, and I had some flexibility with it, and that's really where I started off. Got my feet wet.
That's impressive for you with that opportunity so early on, like you said, with the business booming and it being flexible, part-time, allowing to support you, what you were already up to. What were some of the parts of being in the industry early on that you really enjoyed?
I would say it was kind of, a lot of it was the flexibility, working for yourself, setting your own schedule. Mm-hmm. That was really appealing. It wasn't necessarily an 8-to-5 job. It was, whatever you wanted to make it. And at that point in time, it was, if you wanted to work 60 hours, 70 hours a week, there was enough appraisal orders to do it. So if I was relatively ambitious, put a lot of hours in, and gained some good experience that way. So
yeah, man,
that was most appealing to me. Not to mention, you get to interact with homeowners. That was always fun. And then you got to interact with real estate agents as well and have a lot of conversations with them. So that was really fun to be part of that process for homeowners and their purchases of new homes, and just be a part of that. That was fun.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, but what I'm also hearing is you're one of those individuals that kind of like the people too. I know I was joking with somebody earlier in the week, and we had a really talented team member with us for a good bit of time, and then he and his wife relocated to another part of the country. But I just remember this one particular conversation when he had shared with me. He's like, Michael, if I never have to go out to another property again, that would be fantastic. He's like, I would just love to sit here in the office and he's like, look, I don't mind doing vacant properties, and I don't mind. I like REOs. I mean, that's good stuff. But I really don't want to have to go into another property where I have to listen to somebody just talk at me. I was like, hey, man, I get it. Not everybody has that interest in talking to the homeowner or talking to the brokers or whatever. He was more than willing, to his credit. He liked being on the phone, calling and validating stuff and verifying information, but it was fascinating, Ken. So I can appreciate that you had a little bit disposition, as they would say, than others.
Yeah, I definitely like engaging with people, and I think that's one of the things that has helped me to lead me to where I am today, is being a people person and the love of working with different people. So that's
fantastic.
True.
Love that. And so given that you did literally start coming out of college and, as you mentioned with your, computer science background, how long were you, call it an independent appraiser, dad and co, or Ken the hired hand, however you referred to it back in those days?
It was probably around, I would say, 5 years or so, somewhere in that neighborhood. 4 or 5 years. I worked with my dad at his company, and then I thought, I'm maturing, or at least I thought I was maturing, and getting a little bit more experienced. It's time to spread my wings a little bit and see what else is out there for opportunities just to grow in my role. And so at that point in my career, there was an opportunity for a staff appraiser position.
Oh, really?
a major subprime mortgage lender back in the day called AmeriQuest Mortgage.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people know AmeriQuest.
Oh, yes, yes. That's the name we all remember.
Yes.
So I found an opportunity to have a staff appraiser position, and there's pros and cons obviously with that, but one of the things that were nice was a little bit more steady income and benefits and the things that come along with being an employee of a company. And so I took that opportunity as a staff appraiser. That was kind of my next step in the industry. And, I would say I'm really appreciative of that opportunity. I learned so much early on in my career from a residential appraisal standpoint, because some things were good, some things weren't good that I experienced there, but I grew as an individual, as a professional in the industry. I saw a lot working there, and being that the focus with that organization was their focus was subprime lending.
Yes.
So some of the properties that I would go out to visit were interesting, to say the least. And
what's one of those images that comes to mind when you think about? I mean, because we all have them, Ken. I mean, this is what's.
Oh yeah, we do.
We have so many stories to tell. I mean, give us a good one.
Boy, one that stands in my mind is I appraised a property that, I don't want to say it was like a working farm, but it was like a smaller 5-acre, probably more rural type of property. But they welcomed all of their farm animals in the house. So
in the house?
In the house, they had full access to the main living area, entryways. I mean, it was probably limited to some of the farm animals, but there was a good portion that spent a lot of their time walking around in the house, and
my goodness,
led to a little bit of disrepair, and you might stumble over a chicken or two as you're taking photos of the kitchen. So that one certainly stands out to me, how cozy they were with their animals.
Wow, that is special. And you mentioned early on, the Minnesota location. Where when you all grew up, were you in a more residential area or kind of semi-urban, or was it more rural in nature?
Where I grew up, it was little suburban rural areas where I grew up. But when I was a staff appraiser at AmeriQuest, part of my territory, if you will, was a lot of rural Minnesota. So I was putting in a lot of windshield time driving around to different rural counties and whatnot. So a lot of the properties I appraised were in rural Minnesota.
Yeah. So basically there was a higher population of cattle than there was people, is what you're telling us.
There was, yeah, probably.
Well, and we haven't had the opportunity, Ken, to have too many people on in our episodes that have a lot of rural experience. Aside from farm animals coming into the living space, what are some of the other kind of natural challenges you come across with the rural properties? Now, we're not actually going all the way to, like, say, farm valuation, but that there's a big space in between. Like, I have a home in a neighborhood, and I have a home on some serious acreage, and maybe it's like a farmette.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would say the type of land use that's out there, that's definitely, whether it's more agricultural in nature or hardwoods or lowland, swampy area, all of that stuff comes into play as you're valuing those larger tract properties on acreage, and it's things you have to consider when you're looking for comps and whatnot. So that's definitely something that you learned a little bit more about when you're out in the rural areas.
That's definitely the case. Now, for those that probably have never been outside of a concrete jungle, aka an urban dense area like Chicago in the city, What do you actually walk the whole property? Like if it's like 5 acres, I mean, do they take you on like a dirt bike and you get to go spin around the property? Like, how's that work? As they say, or yonder.
Yeah, you fire up the John Deere and you head out and do a tour. No, I think it depended on. I would spend some time trying to walk some of the property and get an idea, but I certainly wasn't covering every foot of the property. It depended on where it was at, but yeah, enough to get a drive around and get a good idea of what the property consisted of. So
yeah. That's fascinating stuff.
Definitely, I learned a lot there in that position. I learned a lot of what I like to do and a lot of what I didn't like to do. And
that's helpful.
Back at that time, a lot of the appraisers that have been in the business for a while can probably remember some of the. I won't say pressure maybe, but engagement that we had come across with like loan officers.
Okay, come on, man. Call it what it was. It was just straight up like, dude, if you don't do this, I'm not going to send you any more work. I mean, that was the conversation.
That's pretty much what it existed. Yeah. And I didn't like that as part of the industry.
Yeah,
I wanted to do my job and do it well.
Yes.
And value the property, give them a credible report, and they make the decision whether or not it works for their transaction, But back then that wasn't so much. There was a lot of that going on, and that's what led me to a different opportunity within that same organization. Is there was a review appraiser position that opened up, and I thought, hey, let me try that out. That might get me out of some of these difficult conversations that you get put in front of you and get on the other end of things. And so that's really where I took my first step in the review space, if you will. And that's really where I found my niche, was in the appraisal review side of things. So I started doing appraisal reviews for AmeriQuest Mortgage Company, and did that for, I don't know, a period of time, a year or two. And then they ended up closing up shop, as a lot of people will remember. They closed up shop, and that led me to kind of reevaluate myself and give me an opportunity to look at, well, what do I want to do now? Where do I want to go with the industry? But I really liked being a part of that review process. I liked looking at other appraisers' appraisal reports and really learning from those. And it wasn't necessarily to like critique another appraiser, but one of the things that I've learned just throughout my career is there are a lot of really good appraisers out there in our industry.
I completely agree.
And seeing how other appraisers write appraisal reports and what they do to support their adjustments and reach their conclusions, I was fascinated by that. I liked learning. That really helped me become a better appraiser.
Yes.
Was looking at, over the course of my career, thousands of different appraisal reports, I suppose. But so from there, I took an opportunity with U.S. Bank as an appraisal manager there.
I see.
That was really the next step, but that position was really around the review side of things.
Oh, I see.
And I worked for a wholesale and correspondent lending division of U.S. Bank, and was fortunate enough to be put in an office where I was the only appraiser, and I worked with underwriters, and I was the only appraiser in that division or that part of the office. And I really got to see things through an underwriter's perspective as well, how they were evaluating collateral, what they were looking at from loan to value ratios and all the credit and all the different things that they analyzed as they're underwriting the process.
Yes.
But I was the subject matter expert, if you will, on the appraisal collateral. And so I was responsible for helping train and educate the underwriters that were in the office and teach them a little bit more about the appraisal process. And I was reviewing appraisals with them. They would escalate appraisal reports up to me, and I would review them. And these were reviews that we were, doing all around the country. So that was fascinating to me, and also part of my job there as a wholesale and correspondent lender that I was working with. Is we would go out at that point. U.S. Bank would be purchasing different loans or bulks of loans from others, and so I would do a little bit of traveling around the country, and I would with a few underwriters, but we would go into these banks and we would review loans at really a bulk level, and I would flip through the appraisal reports and try to identify any collateral risk. And
I see.
We would be studying these appraisal reports on one side of the desk or another, on which were higher risk.
That's fascinating.
Appraisal reports or that we don't want to buy versus appraisal reports that were part of the loan that we did buy. And
I see.
It was just that was a high, fast-paced environment. We were going through lots of appraisals trying to do that, but that really gave me a little bit of a new glimpse into what else exists out there in the industry and opportunities. And I really enjoyed working with all the underwriters there. I learned a lot from them. It helped broaden my perspective on different ways that you can look at the whole collateral, if you will. But I still got to be involved with reviewing the appraisal report. So that was another piece, another step in my career that I really absorbed the information and learned a lot. So that was a fun couple years I worked at U.S. Bank.
Yeah, that's a level of experience a lot of people don't get an opportunity for when you talk about moving from reviewing and go back to your point. I completely agree. Over the last number of decades, I've had the privilege of working with and a number of very talented people and training a number of people into the industry. But I have consistently found that doing any type of review work is an accelerated way to learn and be exposed to both good and bad appraisal work, appraisal reports, appraisal development, and in a way that it at times kind of feels like as a parent, you tell your kid something, they just need to go out and do it. You're like, look, be careful. You're going to, break your arm. I'm like, well, you broke your arm. I'm like, I'm glad you got the experience here because talking just didn't get it done as opposed to doing it. So I definitely hear that that might have been a similar experience for you, but you also have had that opportunity to, at scale, to review files, especially like with the purchases of portfolios. How do you, or what do you point to from your own experience to really sharpen your skills to be able to sit at a table and have literally like a banker's box of files, like it goes to the left or it goes to the right, like buying these, not buying those, because that actually helps people be thoughtful around, hey, I really like my report, if I'm still writing them, to be on, the good side of the table, not the bad side of the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, boy, there's a lot that goes into it, but, definitely taking into account the comparables, how similar they are from really like a locational standpoint. Yeah. I mean, are the sales, the comps that the appraiser used, are they really nearby and probably representative of the subject's location, or are they chasing a value and going 10 miles away? That starts to lead to certainly different levels of risk. How well adjustments are supported. That's definitely another big area is, actually describing on the why an adjustment is warranted and supported, not just saying that a comp is inferior or superior and throwing the old 10% adjustment on there. It's actually describing what is inferior or superior on there.
Ken, that is such a revolutionary concept.
Isn't it?
It is. Oh my gosh, that's delightful.
I think we're all appraisers are getting better at that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you definitely see reports today where the appraisers still, they use a 5% adjustment for everything, regardless of what it is. And, you know, you might trigger a couple questions back to them occasionally.
One or two. Oh, that's phenomenal. And, you know, in that, at those times where your institution would be acquiring pool of loans from others, how many conceivable files would you go through in a day? Like if you'd fly in and you'd be the proverbial boots on the ground, kind of doing the little bit of the dog and pony show, and you're kind of coming behind the dog and pony and actually verifying that there is a dog and a pony there. You know, it's kind of the due diligence piece of it. I mean, is that 3 days locked in a conference room with no windows and, you know, 17 bankers boxes, or is it like 1,700 bankers boxes?
Yeah, it would definitely be a couple days locked in an office. Generally, it would be probably, I think it was generally 2 days we were there. It would depend. But yeah, I mean, there would be literally boxes of loans and that had appraisal reports with them. And I would say it would be closer to 40 boxes than it is 400, but it might have been anywhere in between there, depending on where we were at.
Yeah, that's quite an experience. And would you all?
I learned a lot. You have to trust your instinct. You have to make decisions.
Got it.
And you know, that's one of the things I learned there. And I'm not saying every decision I made was perfect, but a decision made was better than not making one at all. Yes. So you know, do your due diligence and make a decision. And then what was always interesting is if you put files on the right side of the desk that you thought were presented a level of risk at the end of the meeting, then you would go through those files with that particular lender and have a little debate on them. And that was always a fun discussion to have too. So
they were trying to help fill in your lack of geographic competency.
Yeah, that's right.
No, we really did have to go 43 miles to find another property that was remotely close in this dense area.
Right. Yep. Yeah, those were some fun and interesting conversations to have.
Oh man, that's something.
So
that was wild. So you, one thing you also touched on, I think that's helpful because not everyone's had an opportunity to be on the review side. As you said, is having been in, and you were working to help some of our, let's say, newer to the industry listeners, not necessarily, I'm not saying they're young or old, but just newer to the industry. Kind of give a sense of the time when you came out of the field work and went over into the review side.
Timeline, I would say it was probably 5 years-ish that I was in the field, boots on the ground, pulling tape, you know, doing that thing before I started to test the waters with the review side.
And was that before Y2K, after Y2K, kind of help people get a sense of, you know, carbon dating?
Yeah, it was after. I was at U.S. Bank just before things really, so 2005-ish is when I was at U.S. Bank, and then another, you know, I thought, well, I'm going to continue to try to grow, and I looked for other opportunities in the industry, and then just before the industry experienced the crash in 2007 or 8, I took a position at a company called Rel's Valuation, and they were a joint venture with Wells Fargo.
Yes.
And I was their national review department manager.
Oh, really?
I took a position.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep. And so that's really my first management position was there, where I had employees in my department that I was responsible for training and educating and whatnot. And that, you know, I was, again, another position that I was extremely thankful for. And I got to be in that role, I want to say, for 6 or 8 months before everything started to kind of crash and burn in terms of property values. And so I learned a lot there as well in terms of what were some of the things that were appraisers were doing that might have contributed, property values and whatnot. But definitely that was, my first management position was there. And I had to learn a little bit more just from a manager's perspective, how to manage employees. Because prior to that, I was more an individual contributor role. I definitely worked with a lot of different people, but I wasn't responsible for the performance of a group. And I really liked that.
Oh, wow.
I loved working with having employees, and there was a lot of appraisers on the team. But at this point in my career, I had felt like I had learned and been exposed to a fair amount and loved sharing that information with, the people on the team.
Yes.
And also learning from them. Some of them were veterans in the industry as well.
Oh, wow.
I tried absorbing that information, but learned a lot, started to, again, review for origination purposes. Reviewing appraisals. Yes. So then I started to get into the origination side of things, and you started to learn a little bit more on the sensitivity on these are origination-based loans. So you need to balance turn times and quality and all of those metrics and reviewing these. And so that gave me more experience there. And that was in 2007 is when I started there.
That's a heck of a time to be there. So if you're coming into that role, as you said, it's that first real opportunity where you had to manage people. Do they send you to Rels University where they can just indoctrinate you in people management skills? Or is it kind of one of those Fred Flintstone, one hand on the wheel, one hand on the road? Because people are thinking well, how do you ever get there? And how do I ever get that kind of experience? And sometimes it's not as obvious as you think, or it's just as obvious as you think. What was your learning trajectory? Was it you just kind of have a knack for it, or was there sufficient training and development?
Yeah, I would say it was a little more baptism by fire, if you will. I got thrown into it. Definitely my experience leading up to that, working for some other bigger national organizations, definitely helped get me my foot in the door there. And I had that review experience on reviewing appraisals from a national perspective. And I was lucky enough to get an opportunity for an interview. And it's funny, I actually still remember my interview that I had. Okay. And going into that, I think it was on maybe a Monday, and I had the stomach flu that weekend and felt just horrible. And my interview, I think, was scheduled for a Monday or whatever it was, but I was not feeling well going into my interview at that position. But I decided it's my only opportunity for this interview. I know a lot of other people have applied, so I'm just going to go into it and give it my best shot and see what happens. And I don't know if I had a fever and what it was, but I apparently interviewed fairly well for it and got lucky enough for them to give me an offer for the position. So I always laugh because I was on the fence of canceling that interview and not going through with it just because I felt so full. Yes. And I thank my lucky stars today that I actually followed through with it, or because that's really where I got a big jump start in my career, was at that organization. And I got to work with and meet a lot of really great industry participants there, where we had a president of the organization. His name was Dan Hackman, and he was an industry veteran that came over from Wells Fargo. And he had a lot of senior leaders on the team that were really smart. And I learned a lot from that kind of senior executive group that they had over at Rels.
Makes a big difference. Yeah, they had a lot of talented people.
Yeah, it does.
A lot of talented people there.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up? Much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
What did you touched a little bit on it already about the difference between origination and being in the wholesale space. What was the level of complexity pretty much the same? It was just the type of business and the demands of the business that changed? Or was it kind of all of it?
Yeah, I would say, there were definitely those things that you had when you were making decisions on the origination side of things. You knew that those decisions might affect people's livelihood, so to speak. If they're wanting to refinance their home or purchase a property, and you don't believe for whatever reason that appraisal was credible or supported, and you're going to tell the lender that. And there were, you started to learn that there were other impacts on that side of things, and you started to learn, the impacts to homeowners on that. And, some of them were good impacts and others might not have been, but it was something that you definitely kept in mind on the origination side, is that you're not just looking at things on the back end and identifying risk, but now people are trying to buy or sell a home, and your decisions or the decisions your team and department are making certainly have an impact there. So that was something that we're mindful of and tried to be careful about and make the right decisions.
That's right, and it's a thoughtful approach. I mean, it's the intention is, of course, to provide appropriate asset validation, but the whole process is there ultimately to support home ownership. Is it credible? Is it viable?
Right.
Is it supportable? And you were part of a large contributor to many people owning homes, which is a great thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it was fun. And at REL's valuation, we also, after 2007 and 2008, there was a lot of repurchases that started to come through.
Repos.
And yeah, I got to be part of that process.
Oh, lucky you. Wow.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But I learned from that. And at that point in time, we were doing the repurchase reviews in-house. And there were times where, we would do our reviews, and if we wanted to push back, we would have monthly meetings with customers or GSEs. And, you would have to have all your talking points and your data, and you would have to have everything ready to go to try to see if you could overturn any of these repurchases, and talking with a lot of other smart appraisers or people in the room or on the conference calls, and see what you could do there. But it certainly helped you prepare.
Yeah.
And you started to see what was driving some of the repurchases, and then we'd make those adjustments as we were reviewing appraisals for the origination side of things.
Yes.
And learn there.
Yeah, that's one of those things where a number of people have actually come into the industry since that just wonderful period of time that so many of us lived through. What was it like? Kind of take us back to like literally the shifting sands from you all being such a large originator, and then that kind of dark, quiet time, surprising kind of, uncomfortable period. And then there were some times where people actually thought the world might have been coming to an end. Long-term capital management failed, and Bear Stearns was in there, and Lehman was a part of that mess. And then it seems it wasn't, but even from an insider, it seems like things move kind of quick from one season to another.
Yeah, it did. And I was really fortunate that kind of during that time, there was a lot more emphasis on collateral risk and accuracy, credibility of the appraisal report during that time. So, I was lucky that, in a way, with the market shift the way it was, my department and my role was in a position to, lenders were really relying on us to make sure we were doing our due diligence and reviewing these appraisal reports so we could kind of maybe help identify some of that risk before they originated a loan on it. So from a review perspective, I would say there was a little bit more emphasis on that, and my department continued to grow because of the importance of just evaluating collateral risk. So that kept me on my toes, and I learned a lot about what different areas of the country, what maybe contributed to some of the crash. And I recall like new construction properties back then in Florida. I remember this, that the market was booming in 2005 and 6, and appreciation was whatever it was, 20% a year or whatever they might have been seeing. But people were signing contracts on new construction homes in 2005, 2006, and closing on them. They were signing these pre-construction agreements for a price that was like at the peak of the market, and then it started to tank in 2007 and 2008, and all of a sudden those prices that they agreed on were no longer supported by the market, and people lost a lot of money on some of that stuff because they had down payments. And that I was like fascinated by that, like, wow, that really, that did happen. Here's how it happened and why. And now when we're looking at appraisal reports, it's really important to look at when was that purchase agreement signed and that initial price established, because the volume was so high back then. We were seeing appraisal, things that between the effective date and the appraisal report versus when that construction contract was signed, it might have been 16, 18 months apart. So that I was fascinated by all of that and being involved and helping try to identify those areas of risk and what we could do. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was good. And I worked for a manager at that point. She was an executive at Rel's Valuation, and to her credit, she was not an appraiser, but this is one of the things that I've always loved about our industry is she wasn't an appraiser, she wasn't licensed, but boy, did she know her stuff. And she had a lot of great experience coming from the underwriting world, and I learned a lot from her. And she wasn't, she wasn't an appraiser, and you would never know it if you were talking to her. She could talk shop with any appraiser out there and, do what she needed to do. But it really opened my eyes up, like, wow, being an appraiser is really important, but you can also gain a lot of knowledge and expertise and experience from people that are in the industry that are not appraisers as well. So I learned.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that one. I meet a lot of talented people that are licensed and certified in this industry. I meet as many outside the industry that in some cases are actually as good or better because they're not in for their own reasons, some obvious ones, some not so obvious ones. They're just really about solving things. They're not worried about, like, I don't need to check a box. I don't need to do this. Like, I'm not trying to validate a loan. I'm trying to make a particular decision, and I want the best information possible, and I want to do it efficiently and effectively. And the nuanced levels of knowledge are just impressive. And yet, to their credit, they're in and around the real estate industries and professions. They're just not hanging out their proverbial shingle or their hat, if you will, or holding out their sign and calling themselves a real estate appraiser. They're just doing something else in the area of like data analytics or what have you. So yeah, it's so much opportunity out there.
Yeah, there is. I know that's one of the things I've always had a little bit of pride in with my just experience overall is I've learned a lot from every manager that I've reported to. I mean, there's been good things and bad things about some of them that, that I liked or I didn't like, but I've always been able to take something away from that position and their experience and help that kind of mold me into the leader manager that I am today, is just taking some of what I liked out of everyone and how they did, handled situations and whatnot. And that's just helped, I've done well there, helping mold myself with that experience that I've gained throughout my career and interacting with different market participants.
That is extremely impressive. So how long did you stay a part of the lovely repurchase environment?
It was, it was a couple years that I was there, and then we grew and had some other departments become responsible for that. But I was over at Wells Valuation there while they were a joint venture with Wells Fargo. I was there from, I want to say it was around 2007 to about 2016 is when I was, that was my career.
You literally rode that whole wave.
I did. I was fortunate enough to ride the wave. I might have been at times getting hit over the head with some of the water, but I was treading water.
Good for you. I mean, that in and of itself is just a lifetime of experience in a matter of years and not decades.
Yeah, it was. I got to experience a lot of different things. I met a lot of great people, developed some really good relationships with folks over at Wells Fargo that have been there a long time. And whether that's underwriters or appraisers over there, I got to meet a lot of those individuals and learned a lot from them as well. So a lot of them I still work with today, funny enough, but it is a small industry, we all know. So a lot of the people that I was working with then, I'm still working with today, just in a different capacity.
That's amazing. So what, given all the experience and exposure you took another opportunity. How did that come about?
Yeah, so that was kind of a natural one where the joint venture ended and CoreLogic became the sole owner of, kind of merged a couple companies. So it was Wells Valuation and LandSafe Appraisals. CoreLogic bought out the ownership interests in that, and the joint venture era kind of ended with those. And so just through a natural progression there, I moved into a role. I think I was like senior leader of our valuation quality is what my title was, but it was still in the review spaces, appraisal review end of things. But wow, did my number of, employees and responsibility, it really grew when with that, as those two organizations merged. And we, I want to say at one point in time, just in my department alone, and all I had was staff appraisers, licensed or certified appraisers in my department. There was well over 100 of us that were just responsible for reviewing appraisal reports.
That's amazing.
And yeah, I mean, we were reviewing reports for Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and a lot of other smaller lenders, but that presented its own opportunities there, challenges and learning opportunities, but met a lot of people from the other side that we merged with, and that just created just some natural work for us related to processes and merging processes and systems and ideas and suggestions and personalities and all of that fun stuff. But so that's really, I started to really get into like process evaluation at that point in my career, where it was really focused around, wow, we have a lot of people doing what we're doing. What can we do to become more efficient while still remaining effective there? And so a lot of my time was spent just evaluating processes and what do we need to have in place versus something that maybe we can do without. And so learned a lot there. Also got to be a little bit more involved with things from like the compliance side of things. So I started to gain more experience there with all of the different state requirements that were out there for appraisers from a review perspective, and where you needed to be licensed versus where you didn't, and geographic competency, and the different types of appraisal reviews on use PAP compliance, standard 3 appraisal review versus, reports with values and that were technically an appraisal. So I just got to learn a lot more from the compliance side of things in that area, which again helped me grow in my role. It introduced me to another area. Started working with different state boards on topics, and so that's where I had a big team. I had a lot of managers that were reporting to me who had large teams, and it had its challenges managing just that big of a group, but wow, surrounding yourself with people who are smart and intelligent, just makes your job a lot easier when you have educated, talented people on your team. So
it makes a world of difference. I mean, it's you go a lot further, a lot faster when you got good people on the team there.
That's right. It makes a huge difference. And I remember someone early on in my career told me, if you want to be successful as a leader or manager, make sure that you're hiring people that are smarter than you. And that stuck with me a little bit. I'd like to say that even today I have direct reports that they're really good at what they do, and everyone has their little area of expertise, but having the right people on the team.
It makes a world of difference, both in terms of helping carry the load, so to speak, but also, creating new results. And, if it's same old, no surprise, it doesn't look very different day after day, week after week, and year after year. So even more. And I think what I'm hearing through all this, Ken, and, please help shed some light on it, is that you continued to have focus in roles that also kind of naturally lined up with your abilities. I mean, you had to learn some things along the way, of course, like some trials by fire, but you weren't so out of your natural zone of ability that you couldn't continue to meet the next opportunity and challenge.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I tried to play to my strengths a little bit and knew where I was good at and had some experience, and that's where I kind of just continued to push things and push myself in my career with different opportunities. And it takes a little bit of courage to explore different opportunities and leave the nest at a place that you've been comfortable with or whatnot. But looking back on it, I'm sure glad that I did take some of those opportunities and risk, because it's helped.
I think that's such an important message today. It's such a simple saying, but emotionally difficult to do, and that is, you can't go somewhere new when you're still holding on to where you're at. And I really appreciate that. That's a step in an action that you've done multiple times throughout your career, and each time stepped into not only a new opportunity, some new challenges, and literally things that were completely not exactly what you were doing before, but there's common thread moving through all of it.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of commonalities, and some of the foundation of what it is has always been similar, and it's just continued to add a little bit more responsibilities or nuances to what it is, and it's helped me move around a little bit.
Absolutely fascinating. There's another chapter to your story yet. I mean, you guess it. I mean, this guy must have started working back when he, like in the Stone Age. Man, he's accomplished so much in a short amount of time. What was that next chapter?
I feel like it. Yeah, well, one of the things while I was, working at CoreLogic, one of the things that we were focused on is technology. How can, I mentioned that before, how can we do things better, faster, cheaper, if you will. So as I was involved from a process standpoint and leveraging technology in different ways, that really presented kind of my next opportunity at Clear Capital. They were a growing company that was in the appraisal space, and they were a little bit newer on the appraisal side of things. Certainly they've been around for a long time, but on the appraisal space, they were a little bit newer. And an opportunity presented itself for me to come over there as the senior director of quality assurance and help bring some of those ideas, the innovative ideas, to that team or that group, in terms of how could we leverage technology a little bit different, leverage the rich data and analytics that Clear Capital is known for. How can we build that out and leverage all of that within the quality assurance space while still trying to achieve results at the same time? So it was really a good opportunity for me to come over and bring some of my experience that I had from a technology perspective, bring that over to Clear Capital and help build some processes around what we could do to be more efficient, more effective, and be a part of a growing organization. So I had a number of, at that point in time, Tim O'Brien was over at Clear Capital, who I know you've had on your show here before, but Tim and I have worked together for a long time. He kind of introduced me to the opportunity and got me in contact with Dwayne Andrews, the CEO over here at Clear Capital. And so we had a number of meetings and discussions, and one thing led to another. And I was fortunate enough where they gave me an offer to come over and give them a helping hand. And that's, again, led to some additional opportunity within the organization here. But certainly, I was brought on originally as the senior director of quality assurance and managing a team of both appraisers, certified licensed appraisers, and a team that's also non-licensed appraisers that are responsible for reviewing appraisal reports around the country. And again, bringing some ideas and solutions that I had experience with, how we could leverage that technology to do things smarter. So came over here and started with a great team. Again, to like the point that you mentioned earlier, it was very similar role to what I kind of had been doing, just a different organization, a different way of doing things, different systems. And I loved that. I, loved coming in, learning different ways on how another appraisal management company, if you will, was looking at things and what they were doing and what are the systems and the different platforms that they have that they're working with, and look under the hood at all of those. What could we do? What changes could we make to be more effective with that? And that's been a lot of fun. It's gave me a lot of good experience doing that.
You've touched on it twice, and some people may have picked up on it. Probably a lot of people missed it, but when you have a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that move, for oversimplification, kind of along the same path, this idea of effectiveness and efficiency continues to come up. When you bring that up, whether more of your current role or in previous roles, what are the kind of things that you focus on? Because that's something that someone else who's out there maybe just practicing appraisal doesn't have a real sense of. I mean, they have their own, consistent procedures and sometimes inconsistent ones that come up. But at scale, which is where you sit and have influence over, what kind of things do you focus on?
In terms of
increasing effectiveness and efficiency.
Maybe can you just... Yeah. I mean, it's really around what are some of the data analytics that we have available to us that can help us out, either on the quality assurance side of things. What are things we can do for the appraiser to help, identify risk for the appraiser, So those are definitely things that we consider in the quality assurance space. It's really what can we do like systematically to identify different risk associated with the appraisal report, and what type of review is needed on that appraisal report, because not every report requires the same due diligence. There's a lot of really good appraisal reports that come through, and the appraisers do a really good job of supporting their adjustments and providing a credible report. And then there's other reports that have a little bit more risk associated with them, and that's one of the things that our data and analytics help us identify as some of the risks associated with those reports. And it's not always that the appraiser did anything wrong, but if you're appraising something in a rural area, per se, your comparable sales are going to probably be not as comparable.
Not even close.
In an urban area. And you have to use what you have to use. So, things like that are what come to mind.
I think that's helpful just to share some perspective as people think about, hey, this activity that I'm a part of at whatever level of the industry, like it's a really big industry. It's a big spider web, so to speak. It's not just a little single, it's like, oh, there's one French fry on the plate. Like, no. This is much like the proverbial rock dropping in the pond with a lot of ripples. There's a lot out there that goes on to it. What are go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the other things that really interested me about coming over and that I've been really appreciative of being a part of is just the whole appraisal modernization era. Clear Capital has been an industry, or is an industry leader in that space. And that's one of the things that really intrigued me about coming over and working here, was being able to be part of some changes in the industry that we were, all looking forward to, working closely with the GSEs on the different pilots that they have in terms of the bifurcated and hybrid appraisals. And that stuff really is interesting to me in terms of how can we continue as an industry to evolve and do things better and more effectively, and where can we leverage the appraiser expertise? And it might be in a different space than it used to be, but appraisers do provide they're a really valuable asset in that process. But, where's our highest and best use as an appraiser, if you will? And I like being a part of that as well. So that's kept me on my toes here as of late. Are the different changes that we've been experiencing there, but it's certainly been something that I've enjoyed along the way, is being a part of that discussion and having a voice in some of the changes that are going on in the industry. That's been fun to.
What has been the most unexpected or most interesting? Normally, surprise is a positive thing. Surprise that you've, whether it's being part of a discussion or having a voice, that, if you look back even, 10 years ago, you're like, I can't even believe I'm sitting in this conversation.
Yeah, I would say one of the things is just the modernization from the standpoint of, wow, appraisers don't have to do the physical inspection themselves. 10 years ago, I would have never guessed that you could have a real estate agent or someone else doing the data collection and providing you information to allow you to do your analysis. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. But seeing how effective that actually can be has been fun. Like I said, I think most appraisers, our highest and best use is the analysis of the comparable sales. It's not necessarily spending the windshield time driving comps and pulling tape or measuring, but it's really gathering all of that data and forming credible conclusions. And 10 years ago, I didn't know if I would think that was possible and would have taken off the way.
It's a good point. So. I think one only has to look at the body of knowledge to become licensed or certified. And last time I checked, and it's been a little while, got a lot more gray hair than I used to, but there was zero information around, no, I say zero. It was very, very, very small around like property construction characteristics. So I don't know. It just kind of seems like it's actually just following the body of knowledge in terms of that development.
Yeah. It's fun to see it progress and the new data that's available out there, and how we can continue to try to evolve as an industry and really do things better. And I don't think any of it's the intentions are to remove the appraiser necessarily out of the process, but being involved with a different aspect of it is interesting. So I love that, just the evolution on how things have changed throughout the past years. I like being a part of it. I like looking at how we can continue to find ways to do things better. And at the end of the day, it's the borrower that we're trying to create efficiencies for, and maybe reduce costs for the borrower, and get credible reports over to them so they can make decisions. And it's good. You have to keep that in mind. At the end of the day, a lot of this is being done for the borrowers out there, whether they're trying to purchase a home or refinance. But
you summed it up well. And for those that are in the valuation of property for habitational purposes, aka home buyers and sellers, residential focus, I mean that's where the volume's at. I mean, there's a lot of, we live in a technology enabled world. I mean, who would, many people would have a hard time to believe that, parents would be excited to put their loved ones in cars with strangers. And yet it happens regularly these days. Like, the things that said could never happen. It's like, oh my goodness. Sometimes you shake your head and you're like, I really can't believe this is happening. Other times you're like, I'm so glad this is happening. But that's definitely the case. I mean, given all that, Ken, you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot. Given all that you're in touch with, what are you looking forward to? What either kind of inspires you, or are you optimistic about over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've thought about that, and my role has changed a bit and evolved. And like I mentioned, I was responsible as the director of quality assurance, and now that's evolved, and I'm the chief appraiser for the organization. And so it's important that I continue to try to look at that specific question and topic. And one of the things that I think is as an industry, I think we're going to need to embrace as a positivity that's just around the corner is UAD 3.6. I think that's something, as us appraisers working on originations, that's going to be a big change in the industry. And I mean, I don't know if it's going to push anyone out or if it's going to help people coming in, but I would say we need to embrace that. That's coming. It's just around the corner, and that's I think I'm optimistic that's gonna change is going to be difficult for the appraisers at first, but I'm hoping that's something that once everyone understands the changes that took place and why, that it's maybe going to actually help make the appraiser's job even easier.
Sure.
There's a little bit more consistency there. I'm optimistic. Maybe that will create fewer requests getting kicked back from the lenders to the appraiser because these new forms, if you will, even though it's not a form, but the information that's going to be provided, there's a lot of those common types of requests that lenders are kicking back today to ask the appraiser about are going to be built in to UAD 3.6. So I think that's one of the things that's exciting about the industry and to be a part of and see that through. So that's something I'm looking forward to. And, with that, I think just technology advancements, AI, where are we going to be able to continue to leverage that in the space of not only quality assurance, but how can appraisers leverage it to make their jobs easier? And more effective at the same time. So, it's I think the next few years we have a lot of changes that are going to be coming through, but they're going to be fun to be a part of and explore.
All it is absolutely fascinating. And I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of share that, a little bit of foreshadowing, as they say, or kind of the whole giving a little heads up, like, hey, hey kids, hey fam, we're going to go take a little trip, little maybe spring break action or a little summer vacation. And you're like, hey, that's what we're going to go do. It's not yet, but it's going to be out there. So I'm not saying it's going to be summer vacation when that shows up, but like a change is coming is what I hear you saying.
Yep. Change is inevitable. So that's one of the things we all have to be aware of. It's coming. And I would just say to all of my appraiser peers out there, anyone looking to come into the industry or is interested, I mean, it's also going to present a great time to come in and learn, because there's some big changes that are happening. So it's, presents that opportunity as well for people to come in and have a fresh perspective, and another opportunity for us that have been in it for a while to look at new and improved ways of doing things.
The only constant is change. That is fantastic. Well, Ken, I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Perusing's The Power of Values.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And as I mentioned, thank you so much, everybody, for clicking like on the method of which you're receiving this podcast. And thank you for sharing it. A lot of great takeaways here from Ken about starting out, whether it's at the end of the kitchen table or, some other entry point into the profession. And so many different realms of responsibility and different uses of that field experience that, like Ken said, wow, who would have ever guessed that he'd be in the role he's got today, really helping define what the future can be. It's an exciting time. So with that, we're going to bring this episode to a close, and we look forward to the next one. Until then, have a fantastic day.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.